Whose code is this? It's been a couple of weeks since Liza P. Overture dropped its story trailer, and I have so many questions I hope the DLC answers, but I've been hyper-fixated on this. And I've got a theory now. I had previously guessed that this coat was left here as the owner was absorbed into the insane wax figure over there, but I'd like to put forth something a little different. The jacket was discarded by someone in protest from seeing the wax figure, a symbolic gesture of quitting. And I think that someone was Romeo. I know. Not exactly the wildest theory out there. You could half sleep through the trailer and there's a 50-50 shot you would guess it was his. But I've worked through this quite a bit, so let me sell you on it. Let's start with the coat. This thing is a dead ringer for the tailcoat piece of the Blue Bloods tailcoat costume, except red and black instead of blue and gray. You can actually see the internal lining of the tail inside the Blue Bloods tailcoat is the same shade of red as on the discarded coat. The item description for the Blue Bloods tailcoat reads, "Formal attire of the Stalker Organization of Bastards." The blue tailcoats are the Bastards' pride. From this, I think we can assume a couple of things. First, every full-fledged member of the Bastards has a set of this attire for formal events. They of course would also have separate hunting attire for doing their actual work. Hunting attire is exclusively what we see Bastards wearing in the game because of the state of Krot. Doesn't make sense to wear your blues out into the field unless you're a silly little puppet boy who doesn't know any better. Second, the right to be able to wear these is important to them. There is an underlying implication that not just anyone can wear these, and that one must earn the right to wear them. I think the discarded black and red tailcoat is a purposeful variation of the Bastards' formal wear to differentiate the wearer from other members. My two best reasons to explain why they would want to do that would be that this person is either leadership or they haven't earned their blue coat yet. If it's the former, I think this coat belongs to the leader of the Bastards, mentioned in the weapon etiquette's item description, and that they had a friendly rivalship with the Legendary Stalker, similar to Carlo and Romeo. However, I lean heavily towards the latter, partly because of this badge. This badge is an emblem of the Monad Charity House, aka the Rose Estate, a boarding school in Krot that provided education and career training to children for a path to become either a stalker, workshop technician, or an alchemist, depending on their aptitude. The school is run by the Monad family, whose head, Valentinus, was the leader of the alchemists of the Isle until the Rose Estate incident. We've seen a few variations of this badge now, such as the Legendary Stalkers, which has the badge nestled inside of a blooming red flower, Carlo's graduation badge, which is in the shape of an anchor and kept on a necklace, and the one on Carlo's school uniform, both on the someone's memory costume and his portrait. The one on the jacket matches the one on the school uniform. My point is, there are variations of these badges, and someone with the clout of the leader of the Bastards, who are aligned with the faction of the head of the family running the school, would likely have a different badge than students. I think this particular Monad badge is for students and apprentice stalkers, and so again, I think the black and red tailcoats are for Bastards who haven't earned their blue tailcoats. So how does this tie into Romeo? Well, let's take a step back and go over some of what we know about him. We know he was a close childhood friend of Carlo's and that they met while attending Monad Charity House. We know that he goes by the nickname Lampwick. We know he doesn't have a family and wishes he did, to the point he would even accept a neglectful one. We know that both boys wanted to become stalkers. We also know he was there when Carlo begged the Legendary Stalker to show him how to use a sword. There's evidence to suggest that he eventually got his way.
No one knows style like me, and yours reminds me of the Legendary Stalker.
Despite her initial refusal.
Ugh, so annoying. Germany, get rid of them. I'm off.
But for reasons I'll get into in a minute, I don't think Romeo joined him, or even wanted to. Carlo said teach me, not us.
Please teach me how to use a sword. You're a legendary stalker.
We know from a loading screen that as Romeo was dying from petrification disease, he made a deal with the devil to save more people. Given the circumstances we see him in later, it's a safe bet the deal was to have his ergo placed in a puppet body, and it's very likely Geppetto was said devil. In his puppet body, we get to see that his weapon of choice is his scythe. We don't actually get his scythe for ourselves, but we get something very close in the Puppet Ripper, from which we can use to assume sights are technique weapons based on its scaling. Alright, so in the beginning of the game, we're given the choice of 3 paths to give us our base stats and starting weapon. The path of the sweeper, which leans into motivity aka strength, is for that big weapon bonk build. The path of the bastard is for leveraging technique aka dexterity and is meant for a quick and nimble fighting style. Finally, the path of the cricket, which is for a quality build, a balance between power and speed. The paths of the sweeper and bastard are named for the fighting styles of the 2 stalker organizations, and the path of the cricket is the fighting style used by the Legendary Stalker. To speculate on the inner workings of the Monad charity house a bit, Carlo asking the Legendary Stalker to teach him how to use a sword after he had already graduated makes me think they only teach the basics of being a stalker there, and expect graduates to do some sort of apprenticeship to learn the finer points of combat before being considered full-fledged stalkers. We actually do know that apprentice stalkers are a thing thanks to the Sweepers Branch office newspaper archive stating that the cat joined them as one. So I think this makes sense. Although Carlo went down the path less traveled and seems to have somehow convinced the Legendary Stalker to train him, I think for most graduates, this would mean choosing between the bastards and the sweepers. Because Romeo fights with a scythe and not a sword, I don't think the Legendary Stalker would have had much to teach him there. Scythes seem to be dex weapons, and Romeo fights quite nimbly. I think Romeo chose to apprentice with the bastards and learn their fighting style.
Quick and classy. That's the bastard's way.
One of the other defining features of the bastards is many of them have been disowned or disinherited by noble families, hence the name. I imagine these family issues would leave many in the group predisposed to forming a found family. There's certainly precedents to back this up.
We weren't blood siblings, but on the streets, he was my brother.
But to take speculation a step further, I wonder if it may have been a core principle behind the group. Your family doesn't want you, the bastards are your family now. If so, this dynamic would have been appealing to Romeo, and I think he would have bought in hard.
Don't say that. It's nice you got any family at all.
We briefly see the back of the Monad badge on the coat, and it's engraved. I can clearly make out the top line, and it says, "My family." The second line is partially blocked, but you can make out "thing" as the last part of a word. I previously assumed with the context the whole word was everything, but it could just as easily be nothing. I'm wondering if this could be a play on the bastard's motto, honor or nothing, and say, my family or nothing. Finally, I'd like to go through the sequence of events in the Lies of P Overture story trailer. The subtext for the trailer is that, up until the point where the two meet in the cabin, we see the Legendary Stalker going somewhere, and sometime after, Geppetto's puppet is following the same path as he's tracking her. For the most part, Geppetto's puppet is following her trail of destruction as we see dead alchemists and roses, a symbol of the Legendary Stalker, left behind. In the middle of this sequence, he passes through a room with a broken blade from Romeo's scythe stuck in the floor. It's interesting because although his weapon appears to be broken, it has blood dripping from it, meaning he was likely the one who struck a blow. I think there's some symbolism we can take from here. Romeo is out there and fighting, but broken. Maybe his petrification disease is slowing him down. The interesting implication here, though, is this puts Romeo on the same path the Legendary Stalker is traveling at some point. And 2 scenes later, she finds the discarded tailcoat, but also candles. Romeo's book counterpart goes by Lampwick or Candlewick, depending on the translation. He goes explicitly by Lampwick in Lies of P.
Call me Lampwick.
But do you remember this line from Arlecchino when you get the candle reel right in Malum?
You know, I wonder, perhaps it's your connection to Candle, because the answer is, right? You get it, but you're not feeling violent. Huh, even better.
This is almost definitely referring to Romeo, and gives us precedence to connect candles to Romeo. It's pretty clear that Geppetto's puppet is tracking the Legendary Stalker, but who is the Legendary Stalker following? Keeping Arlecchino's words in mind, let me describe the scene to you. The Legendary Stalker followed this path of candles and found the discarded coat. To be clear, I'm not saying that Romeo put these candles out or made this statue or anything like that. I'm saying I think when he saw the wax figure, he realized the alchemists weren't good guys and tossed the 2 symbols of his allegiance to them on the ground. He decided he would wage war against them in this life and the next.
I'm doing what I can to fend off both the petrification disease and the alchemists. My puppets and I are taking a stand against death itself.
To summarize my theory, I think that something bad happened at a formal event, possibly the Rose Estate incident. The owner of the discarded coat gave chase to someone, probably an alchemist. I think that the coat belonged to Romeo and that he was an apprentice stalker for the bastards at the time. A little bonus theory with very little to back it up. Maybe Romeo was chasing Simon. The blood on his broken blade was from giving him that scar on his face. The chase concluded at the wax figure where Romeo saw something so terrible, he tossed aside his symbols of allegiance to the alchemist and vowed to stop them, but realized his body was shot from petrification disease and allowed himself to be put up in a puppet's body. The legendary stalker showed up to the event late and saw the bad stuff. She gave chase following Romeo's trail, cutting down alchemists along the way. She showed up at the wax figure again too late, found the jacket and badge, and feared the worst. If you're one of the few still here, I'll end this with one more bonus theory for you. I think this grave by the old stargazer, just outside of Malum, was Romeo's, and the words we hear Leah speak in the story trailer were her eulogy. There are 3 items left on this grave. A rose, possibly from the legendary stalker, a token left by the Black Rabbit Brotherhood, and a note, maybe from his found family, the bastards.